Everyone. I am Maureen Schaefer. I'm a Senior Associate Director at the Academic Advising Center at the university, and I'm really glad to be with you today. Certainly wish that I could be presenting with you in the same room, but we're doing the best we can this summer. So it's great to see you, and I'm glad that you're, or not great to see you. It's great to know you're there, but I appreciate your investment in understanding a little bit more about your students' experience at the University of Iowa. This summer, not only am I working in advising, but I'm also one of you. I have a daughter who's a 2020 graduate who will be starting at the University of Iowa in the fall. So I feel for all of you who are navigating this uncertain time with students entering college, but I do hope that this session this afternoon will help you a little bit in understanding at least what your students' advising experience will be like in putting together that fall semester schedule. So I do want to clarify a couple things with you. This session is intended for parents and families of students who are entering the university through the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So that would include students who are entering the university through majors, declared majors in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. It would include open majors, and then it includes students who are in pre-majors who have plans at some point in time to enter one of our other colleges. So that might be a student who's pre-business, who plans to go into engineering, or perhaps a pre-nursing student. All of those students are considered in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and are going to start out their advising experience with us. So this afternoon, what I am going to cover is some information about how advising works at Iowa, how we help students put together that fall semester schedule, and then some of the support options that they will have for them in their experience at the university as they start their experience with us this fall. As Bree mentioned, you are welcome to use the Q&A feature, and that can be at any time. I don't know, it depends on the day, but maybe 25, 30 minutes worth of content for you that I want to share, but we will have some time at the end for questions. My two colleagues, Lisa Ingram and Carrie Miller, are behind the scenes, and they are going to type into the Q&A. So if you have questions along the way, you're welcome to correspond with them. If you want to wait until the end, that would be fine too. And then of course we have Brienne from orientation who may answer some of those questions as well. So that will be our plan as we go along here, and we'll have our contact information at the end should you have some specific questions about your student. So before we get into talking about the fall semester schedule, I want to start just kind of big picture to tell you about advising at the University of Iowa. So the Academic Advising Center, the office that I'm a part of, is the first tier of a two-tiered advising system at the university. And our staff includes 43 on our professional advising staff, and we see the majority of first-year students entering the university every year. We typically advise students until they reach 30 hours when they're in most of the majors in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So most often during that important first year at the university, but eventually those students do move on to advising in their major or their college. So they're either staying with us for their first 30 hours of their major or until they're admitted to their program of study. We will always tell students about the next step and when they're making that advising transition. Our overall philosophy on campus would be that we want students to be working with the advisor who can provide them the most accurate, helpful information about their long-term plan to help them achieve their goals. Some of your students might be in pre-health tracks or maybe pre-law. In those programs where students are planning for professional school study, all of those programs do require that students have a designated undergraduate major. So for your students, they will actually have two advisors at a certain point in time. Those students our advisors at the Advising Center do maintain a relationship with all 4 years as they help those students to plan for their preparation for their graduate or professional school application. Those students along the way would have a major advisor in their academic area of study as well. And again, we will explain that to students along the way, but that often is a question in terms of the long-term plans, especially for our pre-health students. So I wanted to make sure we mentioned that. So at this point in time in the cycle of the summer, I can assume that those of you who are listening today probably have students at many different spots on this trajectory over the summer. Some of your students may have already had their advising appointment. Some of your students may have their advising appointment tomorrow or next week. So I'm going to try to give you a big picture overview of what's happening so that you can kind of know where your student is and what they're experiencing. What you see here on the screen is just a screenshot of our orientation tile. So MyUI is the system that our students are using that will be part of their daily life as a University of Iowa student. And the orientation tile is where they're starting this summer. They are giving us, oh, I did the wrong thing. Sorry. I'm clicking the wrong thing here. Through the orientation tile, and Bree, if anything changed on my screen, just let me know.
Looks good.
Okay, sometimes I hit certain things. Through the orientation tile, your students are doing a variety of things. They're giving us some information, they're answering questions about their major, they're giving us information about incoming transfer or test credit, but they're also learning a lot through this orientation tile. So there are things for them to read, and there are video modules. We try to keep them brief, but video modules for them to review. And all of this helps them to have some context to prepare them for registration and the advising appointment. So our advisors through this process, after your student completes their portion of the advising tile and they make their advising appointment, our advisors will reach out to your student about a week before their advising appointment. And that email or actually it'll come to your student through their email. It'll tell them that something has been shared on their orientation tile and they go into MyUI to view it. But it's a specific message for your student from their academic advisor. And advisors are going into the orientation tile and looking at everything about your student's background. This is individual outreach that your student is receiving with recommendations for their fall schedule. So I think it's important for you to know what advisors are looking at. They're looking at your student's high school record, their test scores, their placement test scores, any transfer credit or test credit that your student has coming in, and they're also looking at what your student has listed for their major. So all of those things go into the recommendations that the advisor will make for your student and how they should prepare for the advising appointment. In the best case scenario, your student has done some preparation for that advising appointment. So they will have a 45-minute Zoom appointment with their academic advisor. I say by Zoom, that's the preferred mode. We will obviously work with students with whatever technology limitations they might have, but Zoom would be our preferred way for them to share screens, because during that appointment, the advisor is going to get to know your student and hear about their interests and their goals for their time at the University of Iowa, and your student is actually going to build their schedule during that appointment and register. It's most helpful if your student can think in advance and look at our registration system, look at information about courses, and have some courses that are of interest prepared. Through our registration system, it nowadays is a lot like online shopping for our students, in that when they're in the system, classes that are of interest to them, they can put into a course cart. They're not registering for them, they're just kind of flagging them to say, oh, that's of interest, that's of interest. And so an ideal situation would be that a student would come to this advising appointment with a number of courses in the course cart, and then they and their advisor can talk about those classes and what's going to work best for them. So the advisor will meet them where they are, they'll talk about the schedule, and then the student will actually register. We do recommend that the student attend this appointment on their own. This is the beginning of the advising relationship between the student and their advisor. I know as a parent, my daughter and I talked a lot before her advising appointment. So I would encourage you, to the extent possible, that you sit down with your student and you look at the orientation tile, you talk to them in advance of their advising appointment about classes that might be of interest, and help them think through questions that they want to ask their academic advisor. I know this from parenting, but also from advising for a number of years, that often when put on the spot, do you have any other questions? Students will say no, and then they'll think of them later. So I think it's helpful to talk with your student in advance about what are your goals for this appointment, what are the things you want to learn, and maybe even have them write those out. And then they can tell you about that after the advising experience. But it is most helpful if the student can be able to focus and make their decisions, and talk with their advisor in that way. I think that's all I was going to say. Let me make sure, checking my notes here, all the things I wanted to say about the registration. So yes, they are then going through and clicking register when they are in that appointment. So that always feels really official, and they feel much better when they're done with that. I do want to provide you with some background information about some of what your students are learning prior to that advising conversation, just to kind of give you a sense for some of the things that your students are learning. So the pie chart that you see here on the screen is included in one of the video modules that your students view, and it is the video module where we're telling students about the overall makeup of their degree. And we use these three components that make up all of the requirements that they are fulfilling during their time here. So those include classes and hours that will come from the general education program, the major, and then elective category. Students and advisors will talk about the size of their major. When the major piece of the pie is larger, the elective category does become smaller. So students certainly have varying amounts of elective credit along the way, depending on their particular major. But it's our goal in advising to have students know every semester each of their classes and how it's counting, fulfilling requirements for their overall degree program. I'll briefly say that major is something that many students are really excited about. So it's important for you to know that your student's advisor was selected for them based on your student's major and then the advisor's area of specialization. So advisors will be able to talk with students about the starting point for their particular major. But it is important to know that we have ongoing conversations about major, because a lot of times as students enter the university and they start taking classes and engage in this college experience where they're learning a lot about themselves and a lot about different areas of study that they've never been exposed to before, that it's not uncommon for students to develop new interests, perhaps change their major or add a major, or choose a minor or a certificate program. So that's the fun part of advising and what we end up talking about during the academic year. One of the things we also talk about will be competitive admission majors. So some of our majors do require a certain grade point average or certain prerequisite classes before students can apply. So that is something that we'll be talking about along the way, and it's certainly important for your student to be thinking about. And then I'll say that it's not uncommon for students to be exploring. We know that a lot of students are in declared majors, but they might not be 100% about that major, and that's okay. Most of us as adults didn't know exactly what we wanted to do when we were 18. So it's a process. But we do have an open major designation. So students do have the opportunity to enter the university with this designation that basically says, I don't know yet. I'm open to a lot of things, and then we'll talk to them about the exploration process. And that's the best word for it, that it really is a process. Choosing a major is not something that happens in typically in one appointment or going to the Career Center one time. It's something that happens over time, but we do partner a lot with our colleagues at the Pomerantz Career Center. We make referrals to the career advisors. We have our students, we recommend that they take their courses and that they engage in some of the career assessments. So there's a lot for your student to do to engage in this process of figuring out their major and what interests them the most. So I don't want anybody to be worried about it, because oftentimes students who are open are a little bit anxious. They have this sense that everybody else has it figured out, and we tell them that they don't. But they don't always believe us. So the other thing related to your students' fall semester schedule, and part of that advising conversation, will be our placement tests. And you may have heard your student talk about this in advance. They do get outreach from orientation to let them know that they do need to take our placement tests prior to their advising conversation. So we have those tests in the areas of world language, chemistry, and math. And our overall philosophy with placement exams is really that we want to help your student choose the course that they're taking in the fall that is most appropriate for their level. These are not tests that they can flunk or pass, or it really is just to determine which class they should start with. Now, in the area of world language, your student will talk with their advisor more in depth about that, but I will mention that in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, students, in order to graduate from the University of Iowa, need to reach the 4th level of proficiency in a single language. And there are a couple of ways that they can do that. One of those ways is to come into the university having had 4 years of the same language in their background in high school. And as long as they got up to the 4th level, no matter what year it was in high school, they have fulfilled the requirement for the University of Iowa. They're welcome to take more language if they want, but they have met the general education requirement. If your student did not take up through the 4th level in one language in high school, they have a couple of options. They could start with a new language at Iowa, and typically when students start from the very beginning of a language, they have about 4 semesters of that language to get to the 4th level of proficiency. But they could also continue the language they studied in high school. And if that's their choice, we would want them to take the placement test so we could help them determine which class they should start in at the University of Iowa. These are very individual conversations with world language, so be assured that your student and their advisor will talk about that. I do want to mention that the requirement that I just mentioned is for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So if you have a student who's planning to be in one of our other colleges at a certain point in time, they definitely want to talk to their advisor about that, because the other colleges do have different requirements for their world language. It's not the same across the board at the university, so they want to talk with their advisor about those differences. So as advisors are giving advice for the fall semester schedule, our goal really is for your student to have a balanced fall schedule and one that they can be successful in. And all of these things that you see here on the screen are important to that process. We want students to take classes that are appropriate for their placement, that are appropriate for their major. We would like students to have some variety in the subject matter of the courses they're taking. We would like students to have some variety in the size of the classes they're taking. And we also would like to talk with them about what they have going on outside of school. Some students work, some students are involved in student organizations. All of these things factor into this conversation that we have about their fall semester schedule. While we're talking about the appropriate number of hours, we do start talking with them about the path to graduation. So we do measure our courses at the University of Iowa in semester hours, and we abbreviate that with an SH. And most commonly, classes are 3 semester hours. That's the most common form of measurement. But on a first semester student schedule, you'll see classes that range from 1 semester hour to 5 for an individual course. For a first-year student, it's most common for them to take 4 main academic classes and then maybe some 1 and 2 hour classes on top of that, with the average for the semester hours for a first semester schedule being about 15 to 16 semester hours. Just so that you have the context, 12 is the minimum to be full-time and 18 is the maximum that they can take. So that kind of is the range for you, but 15 to 16 is probably the most common. And when we start talking long-term about graduation, they need 120 hours to graduate. So in general, we talk about going at the rate of 30 per year, 15 per semester. But again, that's individual to your student. Sometimes, actually very often, students have credit coming in, or they might take summer courses in the future. So everybody's path is a little bit different, but that is an important part of our advising conversation along the way. Another part of the fall schedule that I want to let you know that you will likely see, that I hope you see, is that we have some first-year opportunities that are designed specifically for first-year students to help them with their transition to the university. And we have these, there was a module, video module that your students viewed prior to their advising appointment that gave them an overview of these different programs. But I think it's always helpful to let parents know what our intention is and why we recommend that students register for these. The first 2 that are listed here on the screen are programs where students are taking 2 or 3 classes together with a group of about 20 other first-year students. And these programs are designed to help students get to know other students better, be in a smaller class, and get to know their faculty or staff member better. The second 2 are 1 semester hour courses, again, with the intention of giving your student a small class opportunity where they're going to get to know somebody well. The first year seminars in particular are on very unique specialized topics. So we'll be talking to students about taking advantage of one of these opportunities. If you're interested in learning more, I want to point you to the Advising Center website. We do have a section of the website for orientation advising, and after that, searching for courses and building schedules is where you'll find more in-depth information about the first year opportunities. And all of those programs are unique, and I think it's important for students to think about what kind of student they are, what kind of program might they be looking for, because we want them to find something that is a good fit for them. So the next thing I want to talk about is just to address the fact that as I'm talking about your students' fall semester schedule, I would imagine you have some questions about what that's going to look like. So I just want to briefly give you some information that we're sharing with students. Number 1 is that the university has done a really good job of giving everybody associated with the university updates on our plans for fall. So this website that you see at the top of the screen here, I tend to think is kind of the go-to for information about the fall, and new updates will be posted there. There is a really in-depth PDF on there, the steps forward for returning to campus for fall. It probably has a lot more detail than you might be interested in, but it does answer a lot of questions about what we can expect in the fall. And then there's a section within there that does address academics. So what we're telling students at this point is what we know, which is that in general, courses that have enrollments of 50 or more are going to be delivered, the course delivery mode will be online. Now, some of those will be synchronous, which means they'll be offered at the time that is listed on a student's schedule. So if chemistry is at 10:30 Monday, Wednesday, Friday, a synchronous lecture they would need to watch at 10:30 Monday, Wednesday, Friday. There are also going to be some that are listed as asynchronous, meaning that the content is put online, but that the student can view that content at their own pace. What this says is that courses under 50 will be given priority for classroom space on campus and classroom space that will allow for social distancing. But I do have to say that there are going to be some exceptions to this. So there will likely be classes that are under 50 that once our system is updated, that students will see are going to be offered in an online format. And that could be for a variety of reasons, for limited classroom space, for the health and safety of a particular instructor who's not going to be on campus in the fall. So what our advisors are telling students is that while they are registering and they are officially registered for their schedule when they have that advising appointment, that we can consider that schedule somewhat of a draft. In mid to late July, we will get a notification that the MyUI registration system is completely up to date with the course delivery mode for each class. At that time, then students can check their schedule to see how their classes are being offered. Our classroom scheduling department right now is working very hard with every department, telling them what they're going to do with every class on campus. They have to then redo all of the classrooms and then update the system. So it's just going to take some time. This summer is testing all of our patients. We're all learning to be very, very patient during this time. But I wanted to let you know that's what your student's advisor will be telling them. And then I want to show you that when your student registers, once they're finished registering, when they are viewing their schedule on a computer, they will see a layout that looks like this, a Monday through Friday view of their schedule. Right now, the times will be listed, but there's not a room location, and that's the part that will be updated in mid to late July with the class delivery format and what the classroom will be. But I always like to show parents just what the student's schedule looks like at a layout level, because it's your student's first opportunity to really get a sense for the differences between high school and college. And they start to get a sense for this perceived free time that they're going to have when they're not in school all day or not in class all day. So, and the reason I mention that is because I want to let you know that as advisors, we talk about the transition issues from high school to college. And I know likely that you as parents are talking to your student about these transition issues, that they're going to be in class less, but there's a lot of responsibility on them to manage their time. To that shift in learning, a lot of it goes to the student. So they will find in college that they're not doing as much homework, but they're studying, but they're really having to manage their time. And there are just simply fewer graded assignments. So we will talk with them about this in advising, but I do want to let you know that we use this formula. Other offices on campus use it as well, that we recommend about 2 hours outside of class for every hour in class that students are devoting to their coursework. So that schedule that I showed you before ends up looking like this when they're actually intentional with putting in the amount of time that they need to be putting into their classes. And this by no means implies that they're only studying and they have no time for anything else. That's not the case, most definitely. But it does show them that they will be busy. So we will incorporate this into advising conversations that we have with your student. So when we end the advising conversation for orientation, we'll let them know that they will be hearing from us late in the summer about how advising is going to work in the fall. But our advising philosophy at the Advising Center is that we really want to be intentional and proactive. And that means that we'll have 2 scheduled times that we want to see your students in the fall for advising. They have access to us more than that, but 2 times that we want to meet to talk about how things are going, how they're adjusting to college level academics. We'll talk about their major and their future plans, and then before you know it, we start planning for the spring semester. But advisors are also a good referral source. So when students are struggling or they might need some sort of assistance on campus, the academic advisor can be a good place to say, hey, I was wondering about this, and we can help them navigate and find that information. That's really important. And we will engage in the fall semester in some long-term planning. The orientation and advising appointment is really focused just on the fall semester schedule. But in the fall, we will have plenty of time to do that long-term planning and help your students understand the tools that they have to help with that long-term planning. One of those tools is the degree audit that they have access to all of the time on their MyUI account. And that would be something that as a parent, I would certainly look at with my student from time to time. Some terms that you'll hear about in the future all have to do with plans. We have some sample plans where students can, through their MyUI account, look at an 8-semester plan for any major on campus. So when they're exploring, they might say, what does an 8-semester plan look like for anthropology? And they can see that laid out. It helps them to explore and envision majors that might be of interest. And eventually your student, and eventually might be September or December, but once they're certain about their plans, they create their own My Plan, which is an electronic planning tool for them to use throughout their own time, their whole time here. They bring it up in advising appointments, they work on it on their own, and they can show you, but it's a nice visual for their time at the university, so they can be thoughtful in planning out their 4 years at the university. So before I wrap up, I realize this is a lot of information. I do want to acknowledge the relationship that we will have with you as parents. You may or may not have participated in or taken part in some of the other parent presentations, but most often you will hear people talk about privacy with students entering the university. So I just want to acknowledge that at the Advising Center, we know that parents are still important to their student and their planning. I would like to think that I am not just off the hook at this point with my daughter, but that I'll continue to take part in these conversations with her. But the relationship really will be between the advisor and the student. We do adhere to the federal law that protects the privacy rights of students, and students will hear about an academic records consent that they can complete if they would like to waive that right. And when students complete that form, then advisors can talk freely about anything related to the student. But I think it's really important for you to know that we can still have fruitful conversations even if your student hasn't completed the academic records consent. Oftentimes when parents are contacting us, they have general questions, and we can talk about options and programs and things like that. We just have really like I said, fruitful conversations with parents, and we can listen. You can talk all you want. So I just want to frame that for you to let you know that that might be something that you would hear from an advisor in the future, that they're limited in personal information they can share. But we do know that you're still an important part of the process. And I'll have our contact information at the end as well. On our website, we do have in that same section, that orientation section that I referred to earlier, we have a section for information for parents and families that give you some tips right now for ways to support your student. So if you are interested, you can check that out. So once your student is done with their advising appointment with their academic advisor, they will have contact information for their advisor. People always ask, can changes be made to schedules? And absolutely. And this summer, more than ever, with the changes that we're going to hear about in July, your student might want to call back and say, hey, I want to make some adjustments to my schedule. So this is going to be an ongoing conversation, and I would encourage your student to contact their advisor, or for you to contact our office so that we can provide support for the remainder of the summer. Again, we're just all practicing some patience here, but our goal remains the same, that we really feel like what we want to do is support your students through this transition to help them have the most successful first semester that they can at this point in time. So I am going to take a breath and ask Carrie and Lisa if there have been some themes in some of the questions that have been asked. But if you haven't asked any questions yet, feel free to type that into the Q&A. We won't answer all of those verbatim, but oftentimes there are some themes to questions, so I'll be happy to answer those. Carrie and Lisa?
We don't have any unanswered questions at this point.
Wow. To be honest with you, All of you, this is, I'm trying to think, the 5th presentation out of 7 that I'm doing. And every time I do it, based on the questions, I add more content. So I talked more, but I think it was more comprehensive than had you watched this the first time. So good choice coming today. Maybe that's why we don't have as many questions. I do want to say the last slide that I have here has the email address for the Academic Advising Center. It is important for you to know that your student can always find their advisor information on MyUI, but I know that they will leave their advising appointment with some sort of future contact with their advisor. But this is another place. The Advising Center email account is another place where students and parents can contact us this summer if they need to be put in the right direction or be directed to questions that they have. Because our advisors are advising students every day of the week, this Advising Center email account right now is being answered by those of us on the administrative team. So we'll be happy to get back in touch with you and make sure that you have the answers that you need.
Maureen, we do have a good question.
Mm-hmm.
For a student who is really on the ball and sets sort of a preliminary schedule prior to their meeting with their advisor, will they be able to fix that when they meet or work on that schedule with their advisor when they have their appointment, if it needs to be changed?
Mm-hmm. Do you mean if the schedule is mostly set?
Well, like they've set a preliminary schedule is what I'm imagining, and they want to make sure that it's correct when they meet with the
Oh,
advisor.
absolutely, absolutely. And that's what that advising appointment is all about. And as I have talked to our advisors throughout this orientation experience so far, they have said that they start the appointment meeting the student where they are. Some students will enter that appointment with almost a perfect schedule in their course cart, and the student advisor will talk about that. And that means that the actual registration process goes faster because they basically press click and they have more time to talk. But if a student shows up and they have less than a full schedule, then the student advisor will talk about that. But yes, they will definitely be fine-tuning that. And that's really the role of advisors, that if there's something in that course cart that we have concerns about, the advisor will say, here's what I recommend and here's why. So yes, it's a process, but they will definitely fine tune that during that Zoom appointment. And Lisa, feel free to add if there's anything you want to add to that.
I think that's perfect. We like when students, however, I will say that we like it when students have taken a shot at it and done a lot of research on their own and read course descriptions, and then we're here to give them even more information if they have questions, or as Maureen said, to help fine tune the schedule.
Yeah. And as you might imagine, it takes some time and some thought to read course descriptions and really think through, what do I think about that class? Is that something I could see myself in? And so I know for me personally, and certainly for my daughter, that both of us would want to do that on our own, as opposed to sitting on Zoom and having somebody watch us read the course description. So I think that it can be a more calm situation for the student if they really have a sense for their interests and how they feel about certain classes prior to that appointment. There is just a lot of reading through course descriptions and what the content will be and the format and how they will be tested. All of those things, I think, factor in to a student deciding if it's a good fit.
And we have a few more questions here. Does a student have the same advisor for all 4 years, and how does it work for double major students?
Yeah, so no, not for all 4 years. So we do have a 2-tiered advising system. So the students that we see at the Academic Advising Center, it will depend on the student's particular major, but at a certain point they will move on to an advisor in their major department or in their college once they're admitted to one of the other colleges. And we do always let students know when that advising transition is going to take place. But our overall philosophy with that is really for students to be assigned to the person who knows the most about their academic program and can help them at that particular stage. So, so yeah, and was there a second part to that, Lisa?
Double major
Oh,
students.
and then double majors. So, um, it varies. Double majoring is very common. And so oftentimes when students are at the advising center, because we advise, our advisors advise a lot of different majors, I would say in a lot of scenarios, they will have the same advisor for both of their majors. But once they move on to departmental advising, then they're going to have one for each of their majors. So advisors at the advising center, because we're working with students during that very important first year as they explore, our advisors do advise a variety of majors, and that's what we like to think is helpful about our advising, is our advisors have a really good big picture view of everything on campus. But eventually we're going to want your student to have an advisor in both of their programs of study.
One other question is whether you could maybe clarify a little bit what announcement the university is making in July that might necessitate a change to the schedule.
Yes. So the announcement that will be made is essentially that our MyUI registration system is now up to date. There will be a point in time where MyUI is up to date with the delivery method for each of our courses. Right now, when students are registering for classes, they will see the time of the week, the time of day and week that their course is being offered, but there isn't anything listed about, is this going to be online? Is this going to be in person? Is this asynchronous or synchronous? So there are some features within our registration system where courses are listed that have not yet been added, that people on campus are working very hard to get those things built into our system. And once classroom scheduling hears from all of our different departments about how each class will be offered, that will be updated for each class.
And I think where we envisioned a student might contact their advisor is if one of their courses, if several of their courses moved online and they wanted to make adjustments to get more face-to-face contacts, or they didn't feel comfortable with a certain kind of course being moved online, we could talk through those issues with students.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things that we're learning right now is we're not really talking about in-person online, because there is the courses that will be synchronous and they're meeting at the time, there could be still a lot of interaction. So so we'll be able to see those criteria within the registration system in mid to late July, and I think both advisors and students then will be able to talk about those a little bit more and what's going to work for that particular student. Yeah, we've never experienced this before, so we're really pleased that we have amazing IT people on campus who are creating things in our computer system that didn't exist before, and that we have people in classroom scheduling who are working very hard to figure out the physical space. A lot of good work going on. Anything else?
We've exhausted the questions we have so far.
Woo. Well, I always tell parents every summer that we really just have an amazing staff who love to work with first-year students. They're excited about this time of entering college, and they love working with first-year students. So please know that your students are in good hands, and that we're available to you if you have questions along the way. We really are going to make the most of this and help our students I guess, have the best first semester of college that they can. So we appreciate your patience through all of this. And if there are other questions, feel free to contact us by through our email that you see here on the screen. But thanks so much for spending part of your afternoon with us today. We really appreciate it.